Boo, acolytes. Today we continue. I think my great grandfather might be a serial killer. Last time, I actually had a really short thing where it actually, well, it's probable, very possible, that the killer is actually possessed. So let's see how this crazy epic story goes over. This is quite exciting. But let's start.
Be a defunct electronics store and a couple of clothing outlets. After he had made a complete circuit, he moved on to the next one, and then the next. Once I understood what he was doing, it made it easier for me to hang back and observe. I would stay up near the street and park, waiting for him to finish looking for whatever or whoever he was looking for before easing back behind him and into the next lot. It was nearly 10 now, and many of the places were closed, but there were still enough cars around that I should have been hard to notice at such a distance. That distance was a mistake. We were in the fourth parking lot, and as I waited for him to come back around from driving the backside of the grocery store and smaller stores that made up this latest decaying shopping center, I realized I was taking too long. I put the car back in drive and eased around to the back, mimicking the direction he had gone. As I turned the corner, in the distance I saw him shoving a boy of around 10 into the car. I began to speed up, but he was fast and far away. By the time I reached where the boy had been taken, Sulk was already pulling out onto some back road that led away from the lot. I followed, abandoning any pretense of stealth now. I worried that me chasing him could cause him to hurt the boy sooner rather than later, but I had to take the chance. If Sulk got away, the boy was going to die. The road we were taking was small and winding, leading through a neighborhood and then farther away from buildings and lights. My little spy car, while reliable, was not equipped with the best headlights or any great speed, and it took all my concentration to keep to the road while not losing ground as I pursued them. We were 10 miles out of town now. Fields of lightly frosted farmland reflecting the ghost glow of winter moonlight as we threaded our way through the darkness. We passed a home that was brightly lit with twinkling colored lights and molded plastic reindeer, and it occurred to me that Christmas had been the week before, and I hadn't noticed. Farmland began to give way to woods, and I noticed with rising panic that I was running low on gas, enough to get back to town, to get the boy help, but just barely. This needed to end now. I stomped the pedal as far down as it would go, and the car jumped forward with a protesting whine. I wasn't sure how long I could maintain this speed without wrecking or the engine blowing up, but I didn't need long. Gripping the wheel tightly, I readied myself as the nose of my car reached within a foot of Sulk's back bumper. At the next curve, I moved into the left lane long enough to gain half a length more, then swung the front fender of my car into his back tire. The effect was immediate. He began to spin out, but then so did I. I tried to regain control of the car, but it was too late. I jumped the shallow ditch on the right side of the road, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, my car was somehow still running, its hood crumpled from going head-on into a medium-sized maple tree. Judging by the car clock, only a few minutes had passed, but that was more than enough time for Sulk to get away. I tried to look out my window, but it was fogged up beyond any visibility, so I just opened the door and slowly got out. My head was swimmy, and I had a small gash where I'd hit my head on the steering wheel, but otherwise I seemed okay. Steadying myself against the car, I looked around and saw Sulk's car wrecked in the far deeper left ditch 50 feet down the road. The front doors to the car were open, and there was no sign of anyone. I started making my way up the road to the car, and it didn't take long before I saw the drag marks leading away into the woods. I patted my pockets. I had my gun and a folding knife on me, and that would have to do. Following the path wasn't hard at first. with the moonlight throwing the thick ravines of ice, snow, and dirt into sharp relief. As I got deeper into the woods, however, the shadows and undergrowth began to slow my progress. That's when the boy began screaming. I picked up my pace again, moving at a loping, unsteady run as I tried to gauge direction through a combination of sight and sound. The boy's cries were becoming louder, but they were also becoming more shrill and frantic as they moved from fear into terror. I pushed through a last thick stand of pines, and then I saw why the boy was screaming. This is where I have to ask for your patience more than anything that's come before. I understand I'm giving you a great deal of detail to explain everything fully, but despite the strangeness of much of it, I don't know that anything so far has fallen entirely outside of what you understand as possible. This next part, I will do my best to describe it, but you need to understand that I will fail to really do it justice, and it will sound unbelievable. Just try to bear with me as best you can. I pushed through those trees and stumbled into a small clearing, the cold white moonlight shining down like a spotlight over the scene. The boy, he looked closer to 8 now that I was closer, was down on his back and trying to scramble away from the thing towering over him. Sulk was nowhere to be seen. As for the thing itself, it stood on 2 legs and was half again as big as a man. From behind, I could see its legs were digitigrade, like the legs of a dog or cat.
What the fuck?
Though they reminded me more of rat legs. It had no tail, I could see, but just relatively small hips that swiftly expanded into a large, muscular torso. The back of the torso was largely covered with matted gray hair, though it became patchy and seemed to transition into some kind of black chitin as it moved towards the head. I took all this in quickly and while still moving forward slowly. Then it turned to face me. Its head was a strange mix of reptile and insect, reminding me of a cross between a large beetle and a snake. A hard black shell hooded a long face set with burning yellow eyes and a mouth full of long, curved teeth. The strangest thing about it was its arms. They were different from each other. One was heavy and thick, made out of that same black material and shaped like some kind of savage club that tapered to a spiky lump at the end.
Damn.
The other was a slender, furry hand with fingers that were long and almost graceful looking, each tip punctuated by a hooked claw. As it regarded me, I involuntarily took a step back. My mind was having trouble reconciling what it was seeing. How was I supposed to deal with something like this? Still, I had to try.
Yep.
I fumbled and pulled the gun from my coat pocket, leveled it at the creature, and fired. I saw the round strike just before hearing the wet thudding sound it made. The creature seemed unfazed. I fired again and again. I emptied 13 rounds into that thing, and it didn't stagger, didn't bleed. It just took it without complaint. Then I realized it was making a sound after all. It was low at first, and I couldn't identify it. When I did, I felt my bowels loosen. It was laughing. The sound was terrible, like wet meat and rocks being tumbled in an old dryer, but I could tell that's what it was. Whatever this thing was, it was laughing at me.
I'm gonna be honest, acolytes, if somebody is bulletproof, I just don't know. This just takes me out a bit.
I looked back to the child who had been transfixed by all of this, and I yelled for him to run. I still don't know if that is what killed him, and I try to tell myself he was going to die regardless, but as I yelled, the creature turned back to him and brought its massive club arm down on his stomach. The boy, well, he burst open. The arm was brought down a second and a third time, but he was well dead before then. The force from the blow shattering his bones and sending jets of blood and ruined flesh shooting off in streams from the point of impact. The thing turned back to me, still laughing its awful laugh, and I swear I could see that mouth of knives smiling at me. So I ran. My mind was half gone at this point, and I can't say that I was even headed back towards the road. Over the sound of blood in my ears, I could hear the terrible thudding crash of the monster pursuing me. I tried to go faster, but my vision was beginning to swim, and I found myself struggling to keep my feet. I felt more than heard its hot, ragged breath on my back, and I was turning to try to fight it off, but suddenly I was flying through the air. Pain flared through my neck and shoulders as I struck something hard, and then I was out again. When I came to, I was in a room of some kind. It looked like a basement, with cinder block walls and the musty air of disuse. The room was fairly large, stretching out into a darkness that was not illuminated by the single pool of light the overhead bulb afforded. I was tied in a chair, ropes at my wrists and ankles, bungee cord around my chest. I tried to rock the chair, but it was either very heavy or secured somehow, because it didn't budge. Next, I tried to listen for any sign of noise, any clue as to where I was or who might be around. Nothing. Finally, I went back to studying my surroundings, peering into the dark for any farther information I could find. That's when I saw his eyes. Salk's eyes were reflecting the light from the overhead bulb, and as I stared into the blackness, I could slowly make out his still form. He said nothing, but after another few seconds of studying me, he stepped forward into the light, his eyes still fixed upon me. He was smiling, and it looked very genuine. The reason you're alive, in case you were wondering, is I need to know what you know and who you've told. Salk's voice had lost any forced jocularity that I was used to hearing the times we intersected at the hospital. He stood in front of me, hands on his waist and the unpleasant smile still on his lips, as though he was getting ready to punish an unruly child and savored the idea. I understand you can lie, and I understand that torture is not foolproof. But I have to try, don't I? I looked up at him, fear and rage warring in my heart. I know you're a murderer. I know you killed Rebecca.
You know it's way more than a murderer.
Salk gave me a fake wince as I said her name. Yeah, that was not my best choice. I knew that taking someone from where I worked was risky. But I needed someone, and she was just there. Like a gift. It was easy at the time, but hindsight is a bitch. If I had known you were going to be a super sleuth, I would have tried to hold off. He smiled again, and I was reminded of Alicia comparing him to a shark. It was apt. But let's move past that. What do you really know? I felt my jaw clenching as anger won out. Go to hell. I've told you the only thing that's important. The expression fell off Salk's face like rotten meat off a bone. Dead-eyed and silent, he bent down and began pulling off my right shoe. I tried to struggle briefly, but I didn't budge. I needed to save my energy for when I could make it count. My left wrist seemed to be slightly looser. Salk reached back into the pool of darkness surrounding us, and I heard the sound of metal being dragged across concrete a moment before the hammer came into view. He brought the hammer up to my face for a moment, but he didn't ask another question. Instead, he brought the head of the hammer down on my right pinky toe with enough force to burst the flesh and pulverize the bone.
Precise.
I know I
What
screamed,
the fuck?
but I don't remember it. I was too concerned with the bomb going off in my head as the pain reached my brain. I felt myself slip towards blackness and then back out again. My head was spinning as I gasped for breath, and I realized I was flailing involuntarily, as though my body had decided it was time to escape regardless of any plan I might have. With great effort, I slowed my breathing and movement. It was hard to think about anything but the pain, but I had to try and hold on. I couldn't see my foot, but I could tell from the force and the spray of blood that had shot across the floor into the dark that the toe was crushed, if not torn off completely. That meant I would be slower if I had to run, but it might possibly make my foot easier to slip free if I didn't black out. Of course, that was always assuming he ever left me alone long enough for me to try before he had broken me too badly for it to matter. Sulk was snapping his fingers in front of my face, his expression still blank, but his voice cold and angry. Pay attention. This is your next chance. What else do you know? I knew I needed to cooperate at least partially to minimize any danger and slow things down. Through clenched teeth, I muttered, I know you give things to that monster to kill, or you are a monster. I don't see how you could be, but who knows? That's what else I know. He nodded. So you don't know much, it sounds like. If you're telling the truth, which you probably aren't, but still a good start. He suddenly slammed the hammer down again on my foot a bit farther in. My world exploded into red and black, and this time I heard myself screaming for a moment before I blacked out. When I came to, Sulk was just standing there, arms by his side, bloody hammer in his left hand.
What the fuck?
His eyes rolled towards me when I opened mine, but he didn't move yet, just stood there, statue-like, watching me for a while as I tried to get my thoughts together. When he spoke, his voice was still flat, but sounded lighter, as though he was happier than he had been before. Glad to see you're back. You're down 3 toes now, I'm afraid. In my expert opinion, they're beyond saving. His gaze flicked down to my feet for a moment. 2 of them are pretty much not there anymore, if I'm honest. But hopefully this is making my point. This is how much I hurt you when you cooperate. Imagine how much worse it'll be if you don't. I know how to break nearly every bone in your body without you dying from it quickly. And while I'm ill-equipped to keep you alive long-term here, I can certainly break you enough that the rot and infection that slowly kills you down in this hole will make this. He waved the hammer towards my feet like the scepter of a bored king. Seem like a pleasure. I was barely listening to what he was saying. I was too focused on trying not to look at his bloody finger. I had been watching him closely since I first woke here, and I hadn't seen any signs of him being faster or stronger than I would expect. If he typically hid some preternatural strength or agility, it seemed unlikely he would hide it now, particularly when he was trying so hard to frighten me. But it wasn't much hope by itself. Even normal Marcus Sulk was perfectly capable of torturing and killing me as he was, to say nothing of that monster I had seen, whether it was tied to Sulk or somehow sprang from the man himself. But then, when I woke up, as he gave his best intimidating monologue and waved his hammer around, I saw it. His right index finger was bleeding. That was the hand he was using to hold my foot when he hit it. That told me 2 things. First, he wasn't especially coordinated. Second, he could still be hurt. Ready to answer my next question? His
Oh, for fuck's sake, honestly, you have a freaking demon possessed that's immune to bullets, but he bleeds because he swung the hammer incorrectly. Come on, dude. Come
voice
on.
remained lifeless, but it still had that lighter, almost merry edge to it. He was enjoying himself. I nodded, making a point of moving slower and more warily than I felt. Yes. Water, please. I rasped my voice as much as I could, which wasn't hard in my current condition. It was hard to see what Salk was thinking, his face an emotionless mask as he seemed to consider my request. I felt my heart sinking as several seconds seemed to pass. Then his eyes shifted up in what might have been a look of exasperation. Fine. Be right back. Don't go anywhere.
So
He
it's
turned
definitively
around
under
and moved
3
into
days.
the dark. A door opened, and a light came on in the adjoining room. I could see much more of the basement now, including stairs at the far end that he had not taken. That meant there was water down here, and he would soon be back. I frantically began tugging at my left arm, ignoring the pain and protest of my wrist as I yanked and twisted with all my strength. I had been right. The rope on my left wrist had some play in it, but I wasn't sure it was enough. I started sawing the rope back and forth across my wrist quickly instead, and within a few seconds I saw blood beginning to well around the rope. At the same time, I was aware of the light turning back off in the adjacent room as Salk returned. After a frantic motion to smear the blood more thoroughly on the rope, I gave a last pull to free my wrist. I felt something pop in it, but the blood had provided enough lubrication that it slipped free just as Salk stepped back into the light. Good. Just in time. Seriously. His voice was still too strangely flat to convey sarcasm well, but he punctuated it by throwing the glass of water he had brought in my face. He sat the glass itself down on the floor and then bent forward, gripping my left arm roughly with his left hand as he began undoing the rope around the chair arm with his right. This is what I was waiting for. I knew he favored his left hand, and that he would favor it more with his right one injured. He could have come at me from the side and been totally safe, but he was arrogant, and he thought I was secure, harmless, and the stupid bastard had tied my chest with a bungee cord. An adult human male can bite down with over 200 pounds of pressure. Given the proper placement and force, it's more than enough to rip out the left internal and external carotid arteries in one bite. I had thought of the best angle if I got the chance, but I couldn't waste time trying to be perfect.
That's irrelevant, just
In
bite.
one movement, I leaned forward and down and then shot my face up into his neck, my mouth as wide as I could make it. Distracted with my arm in the rope, he couldn't react in time. I clamped down, grinding my teeth together as I felt skin, muscle, and then tendons give way. I shook my head as I pulled him towards me, and I felt the arteries begin to shred as new volumes of blood sprayed down my throat and out into the room around my lips. I still didn't let go, but I realized that Salk had been squealing, not really struggling or fighting back, just squealing like a dying animal. I didn't even hear it until it started to fade away. As his body went limp, the weight of it did the rest of the work for me, and with a wet snap, I was left with a mouthful of the man's throat as the rest of him crumpled to the floor. I spat it out and began working to get free. Even with my injured wrist, it didn't take long. I kept an eye on Salk the entire time. He had lost more blood than any person can lose and live, but I had seen too much already that night. When I was free, I took the hammer and beat his head until there was very little left. When there was no question about him coming back, I began to explore the basement. The room next door was actually a full living space, with a cot, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom. I found some bandages and antiseptic, doing the best I could to protect my foot in the short term. Salk had been telling the truth. The last 2 toes on my right foot were gone. After I was done with first aid, I began looking for any information that Salk could have left behind, any clues about what was actually going on, what that creature was, but there was nothing that I could find. I felt my strength waning as the adrenaline started to wear off, so I got to work getting out of there. I quickly pilfered his pockets and found his keys as well as my own.
By the way, this is a very smart move because, yeah, as long as the adrenaline is pumping, you can do stuff. But as soon as it actually stops, the blood loss, yeah, this will catch you. This will catch you, acolytes. So, nice
Moving up the basement stairs, I found the door at the top was locked. But after a tense moment, I found the key on Salk's keyring. I tried to move quietly as I went upstairs, images of that terrible creature in the woods filling my head as I hobbled along. I was in a small ranch house, and when I opened the exterior door, I saw my battered little spy car outside. Apparently Salk had been forced to take it when his was wrecked, and by some miracle it had actually made it this far. I hoped it could make it a bit farther. Standing in the doorway looking out, I saw I was out in the middle of nowhere. There was a dirt road leading away into the distance, but no sign of other lights from houses or cars. I could tell that the sky was starting to lighten as dawn approached, but it was of little comfort at this moment. Aside from the terrible pain, I also felt exposed in this strange place where anything could be lurking about. I quickly went back inside to spread around the contents of a gas can I had found in the basement, making sure to saturate anywhere I had traveled and Salk's body as I went. Going back outside, I tried my car and it cranked up with a groaning whine. So far, so good. I had actually forgotten to find something to light the gasoline in my addled state, but the cigarette lighter from the car and a scrounged up piece of paper from my floorboard did the trick, and in a few minutes I was driving away. Having no clue where I was, I saw the tracks on the dirt road seemed to show Salk had come from the right, so that's the direction I headed back in. Driving was awkward, as the car had no cruise control and I couldn't use my right foot to accelerate. Thankfully, it was an automatic, and while it wasn't comfortable, that inconvenience was the least of my worries. More troublesome was my consciousness, which was dipping in and out as I drove. Gritting my teeth, I bumped my right foot against the interior of the car lightly, the surge of pain making me groan but bringing me back for the moment. I had a panic thought and looked down at the gas gauge, remembering how low I had been before the wreck. Apparently Salk had to stop and get gas to get me all the way out here, because now there was over half a tank. I had the unironic thought that it was a lucky break, and then I started crying. Not just a little, but blinding, body-racking sobs to the point that I had to pull over. I sat there in my dingy little spy car for some time weeping. Part of it was the physical and emotional toll of the last few hours, but most of it was because it was over. Salk was finally dead. And that night, as I sat tied to his chair and said that him killing Rebecca was the only thing that was important, I had meant it. The monster, the mystery, none of that mattered. He had taken my life from me, my sweet, wonderful baby, and now I had ended him. But while that was a relief in one way, it terrified me in another. For months I had been preoccupied with studying Salk, with preparing my revenge. Now that it was done, I found myself standing at the edge of my black despair, the ground weakening under my feet as the new reality set in. I had nothing left to do, nothing left to live for. Salk had taken my gun and knife, but there was still a box cutter in the glove compartment. I took it out and held it for a while, testing its feel in my palm and the accompanying idea in my mind. It was tempting. But I kept thinking of what Rebecca would want me to do.
We all know he won't do
And
it.
of that terrified little boy in the moments before he died. I wasn't done. I couldn't even say whether or not killing Salk had killed the monster or if it was still out there, and I hadn't come this far to quit on any of it, myself included. I cranked back up and drove on, hitting pavement and in a small town with a hospital nearly 3 hours from home. When Hold up, I said, cutting my grandfather off mid-sentence. Just stop. He frowned and nodded. We had been sitting here for over 2 hours, and as the old man talked, I had felt my anxiety grow into a kind of strange, angry fear. I stood up and began pacing to try to rid myself of some of the nervous energy I had been accumulating. So, to summarize, you killed this guy Salk, who killed your wife, and he either was this terrible beetle rat monster thing, or he was working with him. Is that the short version? I realized I was yelling, but I didn't care. My grandfather opened his mouth to respond, but I talked over him. Okay, aside from the fact of how batshit crazy that is, let's just go with it for now. Let's even say that you did kill this Salk guy, who clearly couldn't be a monster because they don't exist, but that you were justified because he really did kill Grandma. I paused to take a breath, and seeing the abject sadness on his face, I forced a calmer tone. How does any of that explain what I saw last night? What you did?
To be fair, the grandpa just explained to you that you need a long vorspiel before you can understand it. So don't be a bitch about it. And second of all, acolytes, I think this is the half an hour point, and I have to be honest here. There is a thing where if anything is bulletproof, it just takes me out. Because at a bare minimum, even if you're bulletproof, even that, the kinetic energy should at least throw you aback. Because not even bulletproof vests actually can, first of all, catch any bullet. There are some bullets that are a bit too harsh to actually be caught. But I think it was a headgun, normal handgun that he used, so okay, fair enough. But second off, even if the vest actually catches a bullet, you will have marks from it. Big marks. Maybe even some broken ribs or bones. You're not getting out of there without any marks. It's that simple. So this is something where I'm gonna critique and the soul guy, okay, good. Either he was possessed by this thing, he was the thing, I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood it, but that he, I think, just... If he's possessed by the thing, I mean, he clearly has to be possessed by it. It has to live in him, or something like that. I don't know, or wear his skin. If the thing actually got overwhelmed by a human being, when it can catch bullets and have literally no reaction to it, that's just extremely unrealistic to me. And maybe this will be concluded in another way, or the soul guy was simply normal or just possessed in a way, or fraud, that the beetle thing just possessed him or mind controlled him somehow. But even if the thing was in there, why didn't it instantly kill it? It just took me out. The story was for the first hour so good, so effing good. And by the way, still keeping the details up. I love that. That's why I'm gonna continue it. But still, for F's sake, if you have a bulletproof monstrosity, at least make it ethereal, so that the bullets fly out of it. So you have to have an alternative of actually killing him, because right now the beast, it's just unkillable basically. But let's just see how it ends. Acolytes, good night.